It's April 10th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with a 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs by the Trump administration. U.S. President Donald Trump has dropped reciprocal tariffs on most of his country's trade partners to 10% for 90 days, making room for negotiations. But Trump hit China even harder with a 125% tariffs. And the 125% tariffs on China came after China declared that tariffs on American goods will rise to 84% from 34% starting on April 10th. Also, hours before the pause, the EU announced retaliatory 25% tariffs on U.S. goods, including almonds and orange juice. South Korea and the U.S. signed a new joint wartime operations plan last year, the commander of U.S. Forces Korea says, as part of efforts to counter evolving threats from North Korea. U.S. President Donald Trump has made a dramatic reversal, announcing a 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs that came into force on Wednesday. But he hiked China's tariff rate to 125% after Beijing retaliated. Our Kim Bo-kyung has our top story.
In just 13 hours since the reciprocal tariffs for so-called worst offender countries took effect on Wednesday, U.S. President Donald Trump abruptly backed down on this set of tariffs for 90 days for all countries apart from China, which instead saw its tariffs raised to 125%. Trump's stunning reversal came through his social media just before 1:30 p.m. Wednesday, where he said Washington would pause higher targeted tariffs to more than 75 trading partners who reached out to negotiate with the U.S. rather than retaliated. He repeated his thoughts during an event with race car champions on the White House South Lawn.
I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, because I told them if you retaliate, we're going to double it. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate.
The decision means countries that would have faced reciprocal tariff rates on Wednesday, including South Korea, see rates go back down to the universal 10% rate. But for Beijing, which had retaliated to Trump's 104% tariffs by upping its tariff rate on U.S. goods to 84%, Trump raised tariffs on China yet again to now 125%. Products that aren't exempt under the trade deal, steel, aluminum, and autos, will still have a 25% tariff. When asked whether volatile bond markets persuaded him to pull back on his plan, Trump said he saw people were getting afraid.
The bond market right now is beautiful. But yeah, I saw last night where people were getting a little queasy. They were getting yippy, They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid.
On this, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reportedly told the press at the White House that what people saw, the reciprocal tariffs that went into effect on Wednesday, was a ceiling, and now that they have a temporary floor. He added it would take some time for each country's tailor-made solutions. Meanwhile, for South Korea, the 90-day pause will likely serve as time to negotiate with the U.S. after the new administration launches in June. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
And hours before the announcement on the delay, both China and the EU decided to strike back at Trump's reciprocal tariffs. First, China countered Trump's 104% tariff with 84% duties on American goods. Lee Seung-ja tells us more.
The two largest economies in the world are now going back and forth with tariffs, each hoping one side will succumb first. A day after U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 104% tariff on Chinese goods coming into the U.S., China retaliated, announcing an 84% tariff on U.S. goods. China's State Council Tariff Commission said in a statement that the U.S. escalation of tariffs against Beijing is a mistake upon mistake, adding that it severely infringes upon China's legitimate rights and interests. It added that the U.S. tariffs seriously damaged the rules-based multilateral trading system. China had warned that it would fight to the end if Washington continued to impose additional tariffs against the country. On top of the 84% tariffs, China's Ministry of Commerce announced that it had imposed export controls on 12 American companies banning Chinese companies from supplying them with dual-use products with military and civilian applications. Beijing also added 6 more U.S. firms to its unreliable entity list, which bans them from trading or making new investments in China. Meanwhile, the European Union will impose its first countermeasures against the U.S. reciprocal tariffs starting next week. EU members agreed on Wednesday to join Canada and China in retaliating against U.S. tariff policies. Members agreed to impose retaliatory tariffs on $23 billion worth of American products, from farm produce to products from Republican states. The EU says it will impose 25% tariffs on a number of goods, from almonds to yachts, with the first levies being collected starting next Tuesday. Most of the retaliatory tariffs will be applied from May 15th, and the remainder starting on December 1st. However, the European Commission said in a statement that these countermeasures can be suspended at any time should the U.S. agree to a fair and balanced negotiated outcome. 이승재, Arirang News.
So Trump is really hunting down China. A 90-day pause on Trump's reciprocal tariffs, with the exception of China, with Beijing now facing 125% tariffs. We are joined by Professor Oh Jun-seok this morning. Welcome back, Professor Oh.
Morning.
So tariffs continue to roll in for Beijing, when a tariff delay has been given to others, including us, South Korea. Now, is that to provoke and further isolate China?
With a high probability, I would say yes. Beijing will reiterate to take a resolute and forceful measure to protect its own interest. And as you mentioned earlier this morning, Beijing might be prepared for the fight song of retaliation in the financial market, triggering another isolationism of China. The Trump administration intensified its trade offensive against China by raising reciprocal tariff rate to 84%. Combined with 20% surcharge, total tariff rate on China imports has now climbed to 104%. And again this morning, 125% applied immediately without negotiation. It's a worldwide declaration of no way out. How far could it be expanded? Simply speaking, in the market between buyers and sellers, who has the upper hand? Definitely the buyer. So at the first phase of the game, fragmentation between the two, as the great buyer in the global trade market, U.S. can choose the game first, either trade war or trade facilitation. The U.S. chose dichotomy of the economy. As a result, the U.S. and China separately both turn their policy focus more on each domestic markets. Now, then the second phase of the game, burden of isolationism. Will the tariff be prolonged? I don't think so. I suppose the U.S. government knows well about this, because customers of the U.S. are the great buyers. The domestic consumers of the U.S. have to pay heavier burden of unrealistic price hike, not to mention of short supply of daily necessities, which could spike political pressure as time goes. This will give the rest of the world a chance to adjust the tariff rate depending on the price elasticity and supply affordability in the market. A 90-day pause on the rest of the country would be helpful at this phase. Now the last. When the second phase of the game is over, then counterattack by China will be wait for the attack. For the great buyer of the U.S. Treasury bond in the financial market, rollout of the U.S. reciprocal tariff might help and unite policymakers of China, the EU, and Japan. China will use market power in the financial market, which amplifies financial vulnerability in the foreign exchange market. And so what I'm worried about now, more than anything else, is that tariff turmoil might trigger the financial turmoil around the world.
Definitely. Well, some experts also point out that this whole drama between the U.S. and China is now not about who wins or loses, but rather it's about who will blink first here, Washington or Beijing. Professor Oh, what's your take on this?
It is hard not to see it as a battle of views. Both hardliners have pursued world-changing goals so far and have a lot to lose if they are seen as weak. In this sense, it's like a tit-for-tat game situation. If I interpret this situation in the frame of game theory, I know the final answer. So-called dominant strategies, cooperation rather than defection between the two players. Both players benefit if they cooperate, but one benefit and the other lose out if only they defect, and both lose out to a lesser extent if they simultaneously defect. So the cooperation is the best solution. China doubled down on its threat to retaliate against U.S. reciprocal tariff. China appeared unfazed so far. In response to 125% tariff, China retaliated with tariff on U.S. $185 billion of goods, targeting agricultural products like soybeans, poultry, and pork, which is a very, very politically sensitive sector in the United States, as well as industrial products such as cars and chemicals. It also restricted export of rare earth minerals critical to industries like defense and clean energy. When it is prolonged, the people and the economy suffered in both nations. U.S. consumers faced a higher price and farmers need U.S. $28 billion in bailout. China mitigate the hit through domestic stimulus and trade redirection. Global supply chain might face disruption again. As China exports far more to the United States than import, Beijing cannot match Trump's tariff dollar for dollar for the time being. It is expected, at least for the short term, less than 6 months, Chinese business and employment would inevitably take a harder hit. Next time, however, perfect system will sure to reach American customers and businesses.
Well, good thing is for us, South Korea, we've bought some time until early July when we'll have a new leader then. How should we spend the next 90 days then, Professor Oh?
It's seemingly say good news, but it could never be advantageous when Trump administration created a new tariff barrier, which is not existed before, and they will give mercy of discussing tariff on its allies to reduce somewhat. While U.S. trading partner keeps seeking to lower new tariff, the Trump administration has announced to increase federal government revenue, reduce America's trade deficit, and bolstering domestic manufacturing. Cooperation comes from co-working. During the 90 days pause, Korea has to find a diverse way of co-working to restore the communication channel of alliance to reduce the tension, not only of tariff war, but also of trade deficit, domestic manufacturing in the United States. With the advent of WTO, global standard of regulation and multilateralism in the dispute settlement processes have placed as a general rule in international trade. WTO has emerged as the center of trade diplomacy. Ever since the former Trump administration, they've tried to change global standard into American standard and multilateralism into bilateralism. They want to change the center of trade diplomacy from WTO to White House. Against WTO regime of equal treatment among member countries, Trump administration tried to treat each country differently depending on their weight and then their importance on the national interest. It might be an opportunity of offering unique proposal for adjusting mutual interest as allies. Korea and Japan have been prioritized in negotiation. 90 days, Korea restore the discussion channel more than anything else, and then it could be considered as an agenda with the United States, not only trade and tariff, but also shipbuilding, LNG investment in Alaska gas pipe, and defense cost sharing are expected to be discussed comprehensively.
Professor Oh, before I let you go, now Trump's trying to bundle trade and defense deals in one package deal. And we all know Trump can be very pushy, especially when pursuing his goals. Now, how can South Korea make sure that trade-related issues and defense payments don't get put in this one shopping bag?
President Trump said one-stop shopping is a beautiful and efficient process. This means that they will discuss it as a package by adding a different agenda, as Dami mentioned. That is so simple and easy to understand because the Trump administration could maximize the negotiation capability. I don't want to introduce the terminology group costing versus job order costing, but it might be understood President Trump thinks himself as a CEO of the mode of the world. And if you want to place your goods and service in the great and luxurious mode of the world, you have to pay slotting fee, listing fee, commission, and other expenses, whatever they are. Let's make a package deal, especially for you, 25% as entry fee, and 90 days delay would be allowed. Then what about the shop renter? From the perspectives of Korea, when you receive a bill to pay, you should check the list or item one by one, whether each cost is yours and whether it is correct or not. This is why Korea prefers separate job costing. This is why America prefers package deal or group costing. The Trump administration is aiming for a tailor-made trade negotiation. All individuals and negotiations should be tailored to each other based on country's market, export, and U.S. import. Why? It might be harder to exercise leadership under the WTO regime of equal treatment. Power of leadership comes from power of treating differently. In a sense, it is successful in that countries around the world have begun a full-fledged diplomatic war with the United States over a card that will satisfy President Trump, which means as a hidden meaning is no more WTO.
All right, Professor Oh, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us. As always, it's always a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
And South Korea's stock market is surging, boosted by the pause in U.S. tariffs. As of 9:02 a.m. on Thursday, the KOSPI stood at 2,415.39, up more than 5% from the previous session, triggering a buy-side sidecar for the first time in more than 8 months at 9:06 a.m. A sidecar is activated when the KOSPI 200 futures index rises or falls by 5% or more and stays there for at least a minute. The tech-heavy Kosdaq also showed a large jump of more than 4%. Wall Street also reacted positively to the news of Trump's 90-day tariff pause. The Dow Jones Industrial Average on Wednesday rose 7.87%, or over 2,962 points, to close at 40,608.45. The tech-heavy Nasdaq soared over 12%, up over 1,857 points from the previous trading session to close at 17,124.97. Now, global crude prices also rose on the news of the tariff pause. On the New York Mercantile Exchange, futures for May delivery for West Texas Intermediate rose more than 4% from the previous trading session, while the June delivery for Brent crude also climbed over 4% on the ICE Futures Exchange. South Korea and the U.S. signed a new joint wartime operations plan last year in response to North Korea's evolving nuclear threats. Commander of the U.S. Forces Korea, General Xavier Brinson, mentioned this plan in a written statement to the House Armed Services Committee on Wednesday. The general said the plan was in response to Pyongyang's increasingly sophisticated weapons of mass destruction and missile capabilities, and that the new plan was signed after testing and validating it through the two countries' joint exercises. He added that Seoul and Washington will continue to refine the plan to improve integration and interoperability. Now, if you are active on social media, you've probably come across one of these Ghibli-style portraits that are AI-generated. Our Park Gun-woo tells us more about the craze as well as the potential issues with the craze.
Social media is buzzing with Studio Ghibli-style portraits, not of actual characters, but of real people transformed using generative AI. The global trend has also reached South Korea after OpenAI CEO Sam Altman posted his own version last month, showing how ChatGPT can now create intricate images with just simple prompts.
Whenever I open social media, it's flooded with these Ghibli-style images. A lot of my friends have tried them, some even shared their wedding photos in that style.
Since the launch of the new image generation tool in late March, over 700 million images were created in just the first week. This is my original photo, and I asked to be turned into a Ghibli character, and boom. 2 minutes later, here I am. And it's not just this, but you can also turn into characters like Bororo or Marvel heroes. No wonder it's gone viral. As the craze spreads, Sam Altman even joked on social media that our GPUs are melting. However, the trend has also had backlash. A Japanese animation director known for One Piece expressed strong distaste, saying the trend is tarnishing the Ghibli brand. And Studio Ghibli co-founder Hayao Miyazaki previously condemned AI-generated work as an insult to life itself, adding that he would never use it in his pieces. Copyright concerns are also fueling the controversy.
Art styles and aesthetics are considered ideas, so the case is hard to judge whether it's violating copyrights. The issue is whether an AI company trained its model on works in the Ghibli style.
She added that because this is a legal gray area with not much precedent, international and social consensus will be crucial moving forward. Despite the controversy, some believe this could be a new turning point in the culture and art scene.
The art world faces what's called Baumol's cost disease, rising labor costs without matching productivity. And hand-drawn animation is extremely labor-intensive. Ghibli, for example, hasn't released a new film since 2014, but AI could ease the burden and enable new creations while preserving the original identity.
She also said that with proper consensus, AI-generated art could evolve into a new cultural movement, perhaps even gaining long-term value, much like Van Gogh's paintings did posthumously. And considering that, a tiny Ghibli-style AI portrait might just be the spark, redrawing the entire canvas of modern art. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
Now we take a look at some stories from around the world with our Che Ji-hee. Good morning, Ji-hee.
Good morning, Tammy.
So Ji-hee, let's begin in Germany, where Friedrich Merz is set to become the next chancellor, isn't he?
That's right. With the conservative CDU-CSU alliance and the center-left SPD coming up with a new coalition agreement, Merz will be inaugurated as a new chancellor next month. On Wednesday local time, leaders from Germany's Christian Democratic Union, its sister party, the Christian Social Union, and the Social Democratic Party announced a coalition deal. This follows the federal elections held on February 23rd, where the CDU and CSU emerged as the leading force without an outright majority. The coalition's policy framework titled Responsibility for Germany outlines key initiatives, including economic measures, fiscal policy, defense, and foreign policy. Friedrich Merz, leader of the CDU, is poised to become the next chancellor, pending formal approval processes within the involved parties. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has announced plans to enhance military cooperation with Panama, aiming to counter perceived threats from China's influence over the Panama Canal. During a visit to Panama City on Tuesday, Hegseth emphasized the strategic importance of the Panama Canal, through which over 40% of U.S. container traffic transits annually. On Wednesday, he asserted that China-based companies control critical infrastructure in the canal area, potentially enabling surveillance activities that compromise the security and sovereignty of both Panama and the United States. In response, the U.S. and Panama have agreed to deepen their military collaboration, including conducting joint training exercises and enhancing security operations to safeguard the canal's operations. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte visited Tokyo on Wednesday to meet with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. The two leaders agreed to enhance defense industry cooperation, focusing on developing advanced dual-use technologies such as artificial intelligence and drones. They also plan to increase collaboration in cyber defense, space, and joint military exercises. Both parties expressed concern over China's military buildup and its support for Russia's defense industry amid the ongoing Ukraine conflict. Japan also expressed interest in joining NATO's security assistance and training for Ukraine mission, which is based in Germany. Finally, U.S. toy maker Mattel has unveiled a new Ken doll modeled on NBA superstar LeBron James. It is the first time a professional male athlete has been honored in this way. Dubbed the Ken-ambassador, the doll reflects James' influence both on and off the court. It features a blue and white jacket, including his jersey number 23 and an Ohio emblem. Accessories include Nike sneakers, Beats headphones, and the LeBron James Family Foundation's We Are Family t-shirt. The doll will be available from April 14th to 19th at select retailers and online platforms, priced at $75.
It's shaping up to be a lovely spring day across much of the country with warmer temperatures and clear skies. But air quality is still a concern in Seoul metropolitan area. It's going to be dusty all day today, whereas Busan and Ulsan could get dusty at night. Meanwhile, Gangwon-do and Jeju will see rain through the morning. Then parts of Gyeongsang-do provinces could see some spotty rainfall along with hail in the late afternoon. But overall, it's going to be a beautiful spring day with plenty of sunshine and milder temperatures. Highs will jump more than 10 degrees by lunchtime. Seoul, Daejeon, Busan will be getting up to 19 degrees Celsius. Gyeongju will be warmer at 23 degrees. Tomorrow will feel more like mid-May with an expected high of 24 degrees Celsius here in the capital. Then rain clouds move in on Saturday, gradually spreading to the rest of the country on Sunday with some chill. So knowing that, you might want to squeeze in those spring outings before the rain arrives.
That is all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.